there is belief, and then there is skepticism. Between the two lies a vast territory of questions and the unknown. What if reality is far more complex than we have been willing to perceive? What if the stories we dismissed as myth and legend hold the keys to understanding consciousness? From ghostly encounters to inexplicable lights in the sky, humanity has always sensed there was something more out there. Some call it paranormal, and others call it the divine. Some look to the stars for answers while others search within. And yet, philosophy asks, why? Theology asks, who? Science asks, how? And we ask ourselves, what if? We stand at the meeting point, a place where the veil between realities is thinner than you might think. This is the crossroads of the veil. Your curiosity will drive you to want knowledge. Faust. The excitement of the forbidden invites us to discover what's out there. Cassandra Ashford. This is the forbidden and hidden story of the Book of Enoch, its legacy, and the secrets it holds. There are stories whispered in the dark corners of history, fragmented and feared. Tales of knowledge considered too dangerous to remember. Texts deliberately buried, systematically erased from the carefully curated records we trust. Deemed too volatile, too other, for the fragile structures of established belief. Among these forbidden echoes, one name resonates with a particular, persistent chill. Enoch, not merely the seventh patriarch from Adam, the man who, according to ancient lore, walked so closely with God, in such intimate communion, that he was taken directly from the earth without tasting the bitterness of death. A transition, not an ending, into realms unknown. But Enoch, the author, the visionary scribe, divinely commissioned or perhaps cursed, to chronicle events detailed in a book deemed utterly, irrevocably forbidden by many who came after. This is no simple scroll of wisdom or law. It contains secrets that claw at the very foundations of our perceived world, challenging everything we thought we knew about the highest heavens, the primordial earth, the true, complex nature of angels, the surprising origins of sin, and the terrifying specific genesis of pervasive, demonic evil. This is not comfortable myth spun from reassuring campfire embers. It presents itself with unsettling authority as a direct chronicle of cosmic transgression on an epic scale, of divine retribution almost too terrible to comprehend, and of shadows born from fallen starlight that linger long, long after the ink has dried and the scroll was hidden away. Part 1. The Forbidden Scroll. Forget dusty, impotent artifacts slumbering behind museum glass, catalogued and neutralized. Imagine instead a collection of scrolls discovered in the deepest darkness of desert caves, perhaps still humming with a residual dark energy, ink on parchment acting as a vessel for a truth so profound, so utterly world-altering, so fundamentally unsettling, that generations of pious scribes, cautious scholars, and powerful religious authorities actively sought to extinguish its memory, to deny its revelations. This isn't presented as subtle allegory or coded parable, at least not primarily. It reads as a direct, unvarnished account, a stark testimony attributed to Enoch himself, selected, perhaps uniquely burdened among mortals, as the designated witness to cosmic crimes and celestial judgments that fundamentally shaped, or perhaps warped, our entire reality. Why was it suppressed? Why did its potent, vivid words provoke such profound fear, such visceral resistance, among the architects of Orthodox religion, both formative rabbinic Judaism and early consolidating Christianity, leading them almost universally to exclude it from their sacred canons, to bury it away from accepted scripture, to label it apocryphal, dangerous. Was it the truly shocking, doctrine-shattering assertion that pervasive evil originated not solely from human weakness, not from the simple temptation of the serpent in the Genesis garden, but from a premeditated, organized rebellion deep within the celestial hierarchy itself, among beings created to be holy? Was it the uncomfortable, almost bureaucratic yet terrifying specificity, the naming of angelic leaders like Semjaza and Azazel, the detailed cataloging of their specific sins, and the forbidden knowledge they imparted? Or was it the sheer, terrifying, vertiginous scale of the narrative's cosmology, suggesting a universe far more complex, multi-layered, and terrifyingly vulnerable to corruption and internal conflict than many orthodox frameworks dared to conceive? What specific secrets did this forbidden text hold? It speaks authoritatively of a time before the Great Flood, a misty, potent, antediluvian age when the veil between the realms, heaven and earth, was dangerously thin, almost porous. A time when powerful celestial beings, angels specifically designated with the task of being the watchers over humanity, gazed down from the battlements of heaven and collectively fell, succumbing catastrophically to earthly desire. It details their calculated, conspiratorial descent upon Mount Hermon, their binding oaths sealing their rebellion. It describes their forbidden unions with human women, unions starkly portrayed not as consensual romance or even seduction, but as forceful acquisition, an assertion of power, a violating claim. And it chronicles the monstrous, hybrid offspring that resulted from this unholy mingling of spirit and flesh. The giants, the Nephilim, beings whose very existence was a cosmic violation, an abomination against the created order, and whose brief, brutal reign brought unimaginable terror, violence, and bloodshed to the ancient world. Imagine, if you can, mountains literally trembling under their colossal tread, rivers running red not with silt, but with the blood of their victims, entire forests disappearing into their insatiable maws like fields of grass before locusts. More than that, this scroll claims to reveal how pervasive evil truly took root, not as an abstract principle but as a concrete reality, in the fertile soil of the young creation, originating not merely through inherent human failing, but through a deliberate, catastrophic betrayal by angelic forces meant to guard and guide humanity. It names names, assigning specific culpability. Semjaza, the leader apparently seduced first by lust, then trapped by his pact. Azazel, the defiant purveyor of corrupting technologies and forbidden aesthetics. It assigns blame with chilling, legalistic clarity. It describes the terrifying mechanics of a divine judgment so absolute, so devastating, it sought to cleanse the entire infected world with water, a global baptism by annihilation. This narrative forms the core of the Book of the Watchers, the first, most historically resonant, most vividly detailed, and perhaps most theologically explosive section of the larger composite collection known to us as Enoch, or the Ethiopic Book of Enoch, a complex collection which also includes the Book of Parables with its Son of Man figure, the astronomical book detailing celestial mechanics, the Book of Dream Visions offering symbolic history and prophecy, and the Epistle of Enoch containing wisdom and warnings, together painting an even broader, stranger, more intricate cosmic picture. This specific Book of the Watchers, this terrifying account of angelic fall and monstrous birth, was found preserved, miraculously it seems, like a dangerous seed, sleeping through a long winter, in multiple fragmentary copies within the parched hidden caves of Qumran overlooking the Dead Sea. Here, among these arid cliffs, it was evidently cherished, copied, and studied by ascetic Jewish communities, likely the Essenes, who practiced ritual purity, adhered to a strict solar calendar, perhaps derived from Enoch's astronomical sections, and lived in fervent expectation of a final, apocalyptic cosmic war between the righteous sons of light and the corrupt sons of darkness, communities for whom Enoch's ancient warnings were not dusty history, but urgent, imminent prophecy relevant to their own precarious times. And yet, this text, so potent in its vision, so influential in the development of apocalyptic thought, angelology, and demonology, is uniquely held sacred, fully canonical, integrated into the authorized Bible, only within the ancient unbroken liturgical and theological traditions of the Ethiopian Orthodox Tewahedo Church. For nearly 2 millennia, this church has stood as a lone institutional beacon, guarding and venerating a detailed knowledge that the rest of the Judeo-Christian world tried, for the most part, to consciously forget, actively marginalize, or allegorize into comfortable harmlessness. Its very survival against the odds, clinging precariously to existence in arid desert caves and remote African highlands, shrouded in centuries of controversy and intense scholarly debate, hints powerfully at the dangerous, destabilizing, paradigm-shifting power contained within its narrative framework. This is a scroll that doesn't just recount ancient history. It vibrates with warning, speaking of malevolent forces unleashed, of spiritual consequences eternally rippling outwards, of ancient shadows that still linger just beyond the reassuring glow of our modern firelight. Prepare yourself. Steel your mind. We are about to unroll this forbidden scroll and force ourselves to peer unflinchingly into the abyss it describes. The knowledge within, truly grappled with, might irrevocably change how you perceive the very fabric of the world, forever. Part 2. Before the Fall. Before the shadows lengthened and congealed, before the first terrified cries of mortals echoed across a defiled land, there existed a different world. Imagine, if you will, an earth younger, perhaps physically more vibrant, bathed in a purer, more potent light, a world where the boundaries between the celestial and the terrestrial were still exquisitely thin, almost permeable, a place where divine presence and angelic intervention were perhaps more tangible, less hidden. Humanity, bearing the divine spark, but already marked by nascent flaws, was growing, spreading across this early world, multiplying under a sky thick with legions of unseen, powerful guardians. And watching over them from the unimaginable heights of heaven, from stations meticulously ordained by God within the cosmic hierarchy, were the specific angelic beings designated as the Watchers. These were not yet the twisted, grotesque, bestial figures of later medieval demonology. That iconography would develop over centuries. In Enoch's stark account, they were initially the sons of heaven, radiant, immensely powerful entities, beings crafted from spirit and light, emanations existing close to the blinding divine light, tasked with specific duties, perhaps observing human progress and reporting back, perhaps gently guiding nascent human societies, or perhaps simply standing sentinel, a vigilant celestial safeguarding the burgeoning human race from unseen dangers. Their existence was intended, designed, to be one of perfect, unwavering order, unquestioning duty, sublime celestial harmony, mirroring and maintaining the intricate divine pattern of creation. And among humanity, unique in his generation, there walked a man named Enoch, set apart by his profound righteousness in a world perhaps already subtly tilting towards darkness, he communed directly, intimately, with the divine, serving as a living conduit, a bridge between worlds, even before the great catastrophe fully unfolded. He, through his piety and receptiveness, would become heaven's chosen witness, the reluctant yet faithful chronicler, divinely appointed or perhaps condemned, to record the horrifying fall he perhaps sensed was already stirring in the celestial winds. But the watchers, they watched too closely, their focus shifting, their purpose warping, their gaze meant to be protective, observational, or perhaps even dispassionate, lingered, intensified, and ultimately transformed into something covetous. It fell with disastrous consequence upon the daughters of men, human women walking the earth below. The text is starkly, brutally explicit. The watchers saw their beauty and base desire, illicit and objectifying, the consuming desire, a corrupting seed alien to their spiritual nature. It began to unexpectedly bloom within these powerful angelic hearts. A divine fascination curdled into obsession. Whispers undoubtedly passed among them on the celestial currents, glances reflecting a growing, illicit, shared yearning that started to eclipse their sacred duty, polluting their inherent divine nature with terrestrial longing. Imagine the profound, sickening dissonance, beings forged of pure spirit, light, and unwavering divine purpose, suddenly, inexplicably consumed by desires rooted entirely in transient flesh and earthly form. A sublime celestial harmony beginning to audibly fracture. Dissonant notes of lust and rebellion creeping into the perfect cosmic symphony, unheard perhaps by the unsuspecting humans below, but felt possibly as a growing, palpable tension in the very fabric of reality. An unseen static charge building ominously before a devastating lightning strike. The tragedy deepens immeasurably, acquiring cosmic weight, when you fully consider their exalted station and inherent nature. These were not minor, low-ranking spirits, easily susceptible to simple temptation. The text emphasizes they were high celestial beings, leaders described as captains commanding thousands, beings entrusted with significant cosmic power and profound responsibility, positioned breathtakingly close to the very throne of God. Theirs was therefore not a fall born of ignorance, naivete, or weakness, but presented as a conscious, willful, collective choice, a deliberate turning away from the divine light they knew intimately, a calculated betrayal of their core spiritual essence and ordained purpose. This horrifying capacity for corruption, this potential for utter decay and rebellion even among the highest heavenly host, is perhaps the first and most fundamentally chilling lesson of Enoch's forbidden account. If beings so close to the divine source, so infused with celestial power, could fall so catastrophically, succumbing to base temptation and orchestrating such a profound, damaging rebellion, then what realistic hope was there for the fragile, fledgling mortal race they contemptuously observed below? The stage was now terrifyingly set. The catalyst, transient human beauty, perceived through the newly distorted, covetous lens of burgeoning angelic lust, was poised to trigger a cataclysm of cosmic proportions, forever altering the relationship between heaven and earth. The volatile intersection of immense divine power, base earthly desire, and betrayed sacred duty was about to become fatally, irredeemably, apocalyptically dangerous. Part 3. Descent into Chaos. The decision, once murmured treasonously among the watchers, coalesced rapidly into horrifying action, swift, decisive, and deliberate. 200 watchers, a significant legion, a formidable portion of this specific celestial order, enough to constitute a full-scale invasion or mutiny, descended as one from the pristine ordered heights of heaven. They gathered not just anywhere on the insignificant earth below, but with potent symbolic intent upon the lofty summit of Mount Hermon, a sacred high place traditionally touching the sky, its peak often shrouded in divine cloud, now deliberately, profanely chosen as the site of their conspiratorial binding oath and the launching point for their subsequent defilement of humanity. This wasn't portrayed as a scattered moment of individual weakness or temptation overwhelming a few. Enoch depicts it as an organized, premeditated rebellion, a calculated mutiny against the established divine order, a shocking declaration of independence from celestial law and hierarchy. Led by a prominent figure named Semjasa, their chief commander in this rebellion, they understood perfectly the terrifying gravity, the eternal implications of their intended actions. They knew the unimaginable, everlasting punishment they risked from the Most High. And so, armed with this full, dreadful knowledge, they deliberately bound themselves tightly together with solemn, inviolable oaths, invoking terrible curses upon themselves and upon the mountain should any among them falter or turn back, ensuring collective responsibility and preventing any possibility of retreat or betrayal within their ranks. A pact sealed in shared defiance, cemented by mutual fear of consequence, upon the now desecrated holy mountain. Among them were other identified leaders whose names would echo darkly through millennia of folklore and demonology, becoming synonymous with specific forms of corruption, chief among these, the infamous Azazel, whose subsequent contributions to humanity's accelerated downfall would prove particularly devastating, specific, and culturally poisonous. Then, their conspiracy solidified, they acted. Descending from the corrupted mountain like a plague, they took human women as wives. The language used is stark, devoid of romance or ambiguity. It implies no courtship, no seduction overcoming resistance, certainly no consent. It speaks bluntly of taking, of seizure. This was a profound violation not only of the women themselves, reduced to objects of angelic lust, but a fundamental violation of the God-ordained natural order of creation, a forced, illicit mingling of vastly different orders of being, spirit and flesh, immortal and mortal, celestial and terrestrial, that was never meant to occur. The consequences of this boundary transgression were immediate, world-altering in their scope, and biologically monstrous. From these unholy, non-consensual, cross-species unions, children were inevitably born, but they were emphatically not human children, nor were they angelic beings. They were the giants, the Nephilim, a resonant Hebrew term possibly meaning the fallen ones themselves, or perhaps, more actively, those who cause others to fall, the hitters, the bullies. They were beings of immense, unnatural, terrifying physical stature, possessed of superhuman brutal strength derived from their angelic paternity, and cursed with an insatiable, gnawing, terrifying hunger that grotesquely mirrored the illicit, consuming desire of their fallen fathers. Imagine, try to visualize, giants said to be 3,000 ells tall. While the precise ancient measure remains debated vigorously by scholars, the author's intent is undeniably clear: to depict beings utterly, terrifyingly out of scale with the rest of God's creation, titans whose very presence warped the landscape physically and spiritually, towering ominously over fledgling human settlements like living siege engines, their very existence a monstrous perversion, casting long, eclipsing, terrifying shadows that literally swallowed the sun. Their unnatural, insatiable hunger quickly became the demonic engine driving the entire world into abject chaos and accelerating decay. They consumed everything humanity could possibly produce. Entire harvests vanished overnight. Livestock disappeared from fields in moments, stripping the very land bare, like a supernatural swarm of locusts. When the frantic efforts of terrified humanity could no longer sustain their voracious needs, their unnatural appetites turned ravenously upon the natural world itself. They devoured birds from the air, reptiles from the ground, fish from the rivers, wild beasts from the forests, consuming indiscriminately, savagely disrupting the fragile ecological balance of the young earth. And when even that vast bounty failed to sate their monstrous, gnawing existential emptiness, the ultimate, unthinkable horror unfolded. The giants turned upon humanity itself. Their angelic creators' original objects of desire, the human women and their families, now became their prey. They began consuming human flesh, drinking human blood, their reign transitioning from mere oppression to outright predatory horror. And finally, plumbing the absolute depths of cosmic depravity, fueled by a spiritual void that nothing created could possibly fill, they turned violently, cannibalistically, upon each other. Giant against giant, tearing and devouring, in a frenzy of self-destruction. The world descended rapidly, irreversibly, into a terrifying, hellish nightmare of endemic violence, slaughter, constant terror, and pervasive bloodshed, ruled over by these monstrous, hybrid offspring, whose every breath desecrated the air, whose every heavy step shook the earth, an ongoing active affront to life, order, and divine intention. But the Watchers' cascading sin was tragically not limited to forbidden lust and the unleashing of monstrous genetic abominations. They compounded their initial crime exponentially, perhaps seeking to justify their rebellion, solidify their control over humanity, or simply out of sheer malice by revealing potent celestial secrets, classified forbidden knowledge that fledgling humanity was neither chronologically prepared for, spiritually equipped to handle, nor ever meant to possess outside of divine timing and dispensation. This was knowledge that didn't elevate, but actively, virulently corrupted human culture, spirituality, technology, and the very fabric of nascent society. Azazel, singled out by Enoch for particular detailed condemnation, is blamed specifically for teaching men the deadly, previously unknown arts of advanced metallurgy, not for crafting plowshares or useful tools, but explicitly how to forge swords of superior quality, sharp knives for killing, protective shields, polished breastplates. He gifted humanity sophisticated weapons technology far ahead of its natural development, instantly fueling organized warfare, tribal conflicts escalating into devastating massacres, accelerating bloodshed on an unprecedented, catastrophic scale. He didn't stop his corrupting instruction there. He taught women the seductive arts of deception and vanity, the subtle use of cosmetics to alter appearance, kohl to darkly outline the eyes, making them deceptively alluring, the intricate crafting and ostentatious wearing of bracelets and fine jewelry, the cutting, polishing, and enchantment of precious stones. This fostered, according to the text, not appreciation of beauty, but destructive vanity, obsessive pride, and weaponized seduction, perhaps deliberately echoing and amplifying the very same illicit lust that had first led the Watchers themselves disastrously astray, turning natural human beauty into a tool for manipulation, distraction from inner piety, and societal disruption. Other Watchers, listed by name in some detailed versions of the text, taught other specific forbidden arts, carelessly opening Pandora's box upon the vulnerable world, the brewing of enchantments, the practice of sorcery and spell-casting, the cutting of potent roots for magical potions and deadly poisons, advanced astrology, not merely observational astronomy tracking seasons, but the fatalistic, hubristic reading of stars and constellations for divination, undermining faith in divine providence and personal responsibility, understanding the hidden signs and portents of the sun, moon, and clouds for occult purposes. This flood of revealed knowledge wasn't portrayed as neutral technological or intellectual advancement. Enoch presents it unequivocally as a spiritual poison, deliberately introduced by the fallen angels to lead humanity rapidly away from piety and the simple worship of the true God, and steer them instead towards endemic violence, pervasive deceit, occultic practices, idolatry of created things, or even the watchers themselves, and ultimately, complete godlessness. The seemingly wondrous gifts of the fallen angels were, in reality, insidious chains disguised as glittering treasures, binding humanity to cycles of violence and corruption. The world, already reeling physically from the giants' overwhelming destruction, and their voracious, earth-stripping appetites, now suffered a simultaneous, profound spiritual and social decay, a metastasizing sickness of the collective soul, spreading faster and more destructive than any physical plague. Impiety, treachery, violence, and escalating corruption became the horrific norm, spreading like an unstoppable contagion through the poison channels of this newly revealed, forbidden knowledge. Humanity suffered immensely, trapped under this horrific dual assault, preyed upon physically, constantly terrified by the rapacious giants, while simultaneously being corrupted spiritually and socially by the insidious teachings of their angelic fathers, the Watchers. The sheer scale of the violence, the omnipresent terror, the blatant injustice, the fundamental ontological wrongness of it all, it eventually became cosmically unbearable. A great, agonized cry finally rose collectively from the ravaged earth. A desperate, primal scream composed not just of human words and weeping, but emanating from the blood-soaked ground itself. The very voice of unjustly shed blood, crying out, ascending like smoke past the silent, indifferent stars, reaching desperately towards the sealed gates of heaven. Would anyone answer? Had God truly abandoned his creation to this nightmare? Or was the entire cosmos, the intricate divine experiment, doomed to completely unravel, to collapse under the unbearable weight of this catastrophic angelic rebellion? The fundamental, delicate order of the cosmos was visibly breaking down, the harmonious music of the spheres dissolving into a shrieking cacophony, and the continued silence from the highest heaven felt deafening, terrifying, and perhaps final. Part 4. Heaven Strikes Back. The cries, saturated with agony and amplified by the suffering of the very earth itself, did not, finally, go unheard. In the highest, uncorrupted heavens, far beyond the realms now tainted by the Watcher's fall, 4 majestic figures stood radiating light before the throne of glory, their celestial senses presumably reeling from the overwhelming stench of blood, injustice, decay, and raw impiety rising like a foul, choking smoke from the tortured earth below. These were the archangels, the chief princes of the loyal heavenly host. Michael, the supreme commander, the warrior prince. Uriel, the light of God, often associated with wisdom and prophecy. Raphael, the divine healer, whose task would soon ironically involve binding, not mending, and Gabriel, the divine messenger, whose tidings this time would be of utter destruction. They saw with perfect clarity the rampant, unchecked violence, the pervasive, metastasizing corruption, the unbearable, innocent suffering inflicted by their fallen, traitorous brethren, and their monstrous, hybrid offspring. They witnessed the profane perversion of sacred, hidden knowledge, the violent twisting of creation's intended design, the deep weeping tears ripped in the very fabric of reality by this rebellion, together acting as powerful celestial advocates for the violated earth and the oppressed, dying remnants of humanity. They formally brought the case before the blinding throne of the Most High, the ultimate singular source of all power, order, and perfect justice in the cosmos. Their plea, recorded by Enoch, was urgent, almost desperate. Creation itself was being systematically unmade from within by its own guardians. Divine justice demanded swift, decisive, and overwhelming intervention before all was lost. And heaven responded, not with quiet sorrow, gentle correction, or offers of reconciliation, but with pure, righteous, terrifying fury, a devastating display of absolute divine power confronting utter profanity and betrayal. A divine judgment, final and absolute, was pronounced from the throne, born of a terrible, unavoidable necessity to surgically, violently excise the spreading cancer of angelic and human corruption before it consumed everything, before reality itself collapsed. The decree was absolute, immutable, irreversible. The sentences handed down were chillingly specific, meticulously tailored to the exact nature of the crimes committed by each party, reflecting the very essence of the transgressions in a display of dreadful, inescapable cosmic irony and perfect, terrifying justice. Uriel, the archangel often associated with bringing divine light and prophetic wisdom, was dispatched first, a single beacon of impending doom piercing the blood-dimmed gloom. His specific mission? Navigate the swirling chaos and violence below to find the one truly righteous man still remaining amidst the utter depravity, the patriarch Noah. Uriel was to warn him, and him alone, of the impending, unimaginable catastrophe decreed from the throne, a great flood, a global deluge of overwhelming, cleansing waters summoned from the heavens above and the earth below, specifically designed to wash the entire earth clean of the physical filth of the giants, the hopelessly corrupted, intermingled humans, and the lingering physical stain and influence of the Watcher's terrible sin. A terrifying planetary reset button, salvation offered only through the absolute destruction of the old, irredeemably corrupted world. Raphael, whose name ironically implies divine healing, was given a much darker, binding, punitive task. He was commanded by God to find Azazel, identified as the primary ringleader in teaching forbidden, corrupting arts, the defiant purveyor of weapons and vanity, bind him mercilessly, completely, hand and foot, leaving him utterly helpless, and then cast him into utter, impenetrable, suffocating darkness. Not just any darkness, but a specific, desolate, cursed place in the wilderness named Dudael, a name possibly meaning the cauldron or kettle of God. There, Azazel was to be thrust violently into an opening in the rocky ground, and then literally buried alive beneath a great pile of jagged, heavy rocks, hidden forever from the celestial light he had known and misused, choked by the very dust of the earth he had helped pollute, sealed away conscious in torment until the final great day of judgment at the end of days. A terrifyingly specific, brutal, and seemingly eternal imprisonment, a living burial for a proud fallen star. Gabriel, the archangel often chosen as the messenger of good news, divine favor, and incarnation, was this time given a horrifyingly brutal, almost demonic mission. he was commanded to incite the giants, explicitly called the bastards, the reprobates, the monstrous children of the Watchers, directly against each other. Stir their inherent uncontrollable violence and their insatiable cannibalistic rage into a devastating, suicidal frenzy of mutual destruction. Gabriel was to ensure that they would perish miserably by their own gigantic, blood-stained hands, their own innate violence turned fatally inward, their unnatural, hybrid existence collapsing violently under its own grotesque weight. Heaven, in its terrifying justice, would use their own savage, corrupted nature against them, a brutal, efficient form of divine, self-executing judgment. And finally, Michael, the greatest of the archangels, the great prince and celestial defender, the commander of the loyal heavenly armies, was tasked with confronting the primary leader of the initial descent, the captain of the rebellious host. He was commanded to find and forcibly bind Semjaza and all the other Watcher captains and their followers who had joined him in their conspiracy of lust and rebellion on Mount Hermon. They too were to be immediately imprisoned deep beneath the surface of the earth, bound tightly with unbreakable, eternal bonds, confined in hidden valleys and dark, specifically designated subterranean places of torment, bound there consciously suffering until the distant day of the great final judgment, suffering unimaginable torment for their cosmic transgression for a period specified as 70 generations, an almost incomprehensible span of punitive time, an age upon age of darkness, despair, and burning anticipation awaiting a final, fiery, public consummation of their sentence. But who would personally deliver this terrible, final, irrevocable verdict to the assembled, terrified, fallen Watchers themselves? Not one of their former peers, not an archangel still robed in untarnished celestial authority. In a move underscoring their utter disgrace, their complete and final severance from the celestial community, their cosmic status now reduced below even that of righteous humanity, God chose Enoch, the human, the pious mortal man who walked the precarious liminal line between the earthly and the divine. Imagine his soul-crushing terror, his unbearable burden. A single mortal man, frail in comparison, tasked by the Most High with pronouncing eternal, inescapable doom upon 200 immensely powerful, immortal, rebellious angels. Enoch found the Watchers gathered, perhaps near the symbolic waters of Dan, as the text mentions, no longer radiating arrogance or celestial light, but weeping wretchedly, hiding their faces in shame and terror, their former glory entirely dimmed, already sensing the catastrophic shift in cosmic winds, already tasting the bitter ashes of their impending eternal doom. Enoch, fortified perhaps by divine power, stood before these once glorious, radiant beings, now diminished, pathetic, cowering, and utterly terrified, and delivered the crushing, unappealable news directly from the throne. Their secret pact sworn on Hermon was fully known in heaven. Their specific sins against God, humanity, and creation were enumerated and utterly condemned. Their desperate, last-minute pleas for mercy, which they had shamefully, abjectly begged Enoch, the mere human, to carry as an intercessor to the throne of God on their behalf, were utterly, emphatically, eternally rejected. There would be no heavenly mediation, no angelic appeal, no divine forgiveness, no second chance. Their judgment was irrevocably sealed, their damnation eternal, absolute. Their resulting despair, Enoch implies, must have been a tangible, suffocating thing, a chilling, heavy silence falling upon their assembly as the crushing weight of endless, tormented captivity finally settled upon their rebellious spirits. Then, almost immediately, his dreadful task as divine herald completed, Enoch himself was caught up, separated from the presence of the condemned angels, and taken bodily on an astonishing visionary journey, a terrifyingly rapid multi-stage ascent through the layered heavens, right to the very heart of blazing divine power. He describes passing through overwhelming walls, constructed of living fire, entering into immense celestial structures built seemingly of solidified crystal and ethereal ice that radiated unbearable, divine light, surrounded by flowing rivers of pure flame, a heavenly landscape both beautiful beyond any possible mortal comprehension and simultaneously unbearably intense, inherently lethal to any form of impurity. He saw, with human eyes somehow enabled to perceive, legions upon untold legions of angels who had not fallen, the fiery seraphim, the guardian cherubim, the mysterious ophanim like wheels within wheels of light, countless beings of pure energy, sound, and unwavering devotion, surrounding the unveiled great glory, the very manifest presence of God Almighty. The sheer intensity of the light was unbearable, the palpable aura of power overwhelming, the pervasive atmosphere of absolute holiness terrifyingly palpable. Enoch fell instantly on his face in abject terror before the throne of God itself, a throne he describes as constructed of fiery, living majesty, emanating light brighter than the sun, its base flowing with rivers of liquid fire, the very air, the very fabric of heavenly reality, vibrating with unimaginable, unmediated, perfect holiness. This transcendent, terrifying vision wasn't granted merely as a personal reward for Enoch's righteousness, or just a frightening spectacle. It served as a profound, visceral, soul-shattering confirmation, providing Enoch, and through him his readers, with an undeniable intuitive understanding of the divine perspective. Standing, or rather lying prostrate and trembling, in the immediate presence of such absolute unblemished purity, such terrifying, unyielding righteous power, Enoch understood with blinding, terrifying clarity why the Watchers' calculated corruption and rebellion simply could not be tolerated within God's creation, why their judgment had to be so severe, so public, and so utterly final. The sheer, overwhelming, unblemished holiness of the divine presence inherently made their deliberate transgression infinitely profane, an intolerable, cancerous stain upon the perfection of existence itself. Against such perfect, absolute justice and holiness, there simply was no appeal possible. Heaven had struck back decisively. The sentences were pronounced, and far below, on the suffering earth and deep beneath its surface, those sentences were already being carried out with terrifying divine speed and inescapable precision. Part 5. The Lingering Shadow. The Birth of Demons. The divine judgment, pronounced with fury in the highest heaven, echoed with immediate, brutal violence across the ravaged earth below. As the archangel Gabriel had been commanded, a terrifying, divinely ordained madness, an uncontrollable bloodlust, seized the remaining giants. These monstrous, inherently violent beings, born illegitimately of cosmic transgression and forbidden union, turned their insatiable hunger and their uncontrollable, amplified rage lethally upon each other in a final, apocalyptic, globally spanning, fratricidal battle. Imagine the truly horrifying spectacle: titans clashing on blood-soaked plains and mountainsides, tearing each other limb from massive limb in a suicidal, cannibalistic frenzy, thereby fulfilling the precise decree of heaven through their own inherent, inescapable, savage brutality. The ravaged earth, already saturated with human blood, now drank deeply of their unnatural, corrupted hybrid blood, as they systematically, mindlessly annihilated one another, leaving behind only scattered, colossal bones to bleach under a newly cleansed sun, and a profound, deathly, echoing silence where monstrous life had teeming only moments before. Simultaneously, across the globe and deep beneath its violated surface, the other archangels carried out their grim, precise, punitive tasks. Azazel, the proud, corrupting teacher of forbidden arts, was dragged struggling, cursing, perhaps, against his fate, to his designated desolate prison in the wilderness of Dudael. There, he was bound securely in chains forged of eternal darkness, buried alive beneath the crushing, suffocating weight of jagged rocks, forever denied the celestial light he had known and so arrogantly betrayed. Semjaza and his legions of rebellious Watcher followers were systematically hunted down by Michael's forces, seized, bound with unbreakable, eternal bonds, and forcibly confined deep beneath the hills and valleys of the earth, relegated to hidden, desolate places of fiery torment and darkness, designated celestial prisons, awaiting their final public sentence at the ultimate end of time. The primary angelic instigators, the fallen Watchers themselves, were thus violently, decisively removed from the world stage, securely imprisoned, their direct power to interfere physically curtailed, though their subtle, lingering, corrupting influence, Enoch implies, was perhaps not entirely extinguished even by their imprisonment. The physical monsters they had spawned, the terrifying giants, their brief, catastrophic reign of consumption and violence, abruptly, totally ended, were utterly destroyed, their physical forms returning to dust. To any surviving human observer witnessing this swift, brutal cleanup, it might understandably seem like the definitive end of the cosmic nightmare, the successful final purging of evil from the world. But tragically, horrifyingly, it wasn't. A new, far more insidious, stealthy, and perhaps more dangerously enduring form of horror was about to be born directly, paradoxically, from the carnage, from the very death of the monsters. Here lies one of the Book of the Watcher's most chilling, unique, theologically significant, and profoundly influential revelations, an idea that would echo down through centuries of demonology. When the giants perished violently, their massive physical bodies decayed, their unnatural flesh inevitably returning to the earth from which their human mothers originally came. But what of their spirits? What became of the animating principle, the hybrid consciousness, the nephesh within those monstrous dying forms? They were, by their very origin, unnatural, prohibited beings, a forbidden hybrid resulting from the illicit union of celestial spirit, immortal, powerful, from their angelic fathers, and human flesh, mortal, earthly, from their mothers. Because of this inherently corrupt, unstable, mixed ontological origin, their disembodied spirits could find no legitimate rest, no natural place, no designated destination within the reconstituted cosmic order after the destruction of their bodies. They could not ascend to the pure heavens, which utterly rejected their profound impurity and their legacy of violence. They could not properly descend into Sheol, the shadowy underworld realm perhaps reserved primarily in this cosmology for departed human souls. They were, in essence, spiritual anomalies, metaphysical refugees, creatures of tragic, violent paradox, eternally trapped between the realms, belonging fully neither to heaven, nor earth, nor the underworld. Cursed by their very violent hybrid nature, forever tainted by the sins of their fathers and their own destructive lives, and subject still to the divine judgment enacted upon them, these restless, disembodied spirits of the slain giants were doomed, Enoch reveals, to remain perpetually earthbound, invisible, resentful, and deeply malicious. They became, according to Enoch's chilling specific account, the demons that would plague humanity henceforth. Evil spirits, now invisible and incorporeal, but retaining their sentient malevolence, forever wandering the face of the earth like a pernicious spiritual plague wind, driven eternally by the same insatiable, frustrated hunger, the same deep bitterness, the same destructive rage and envy that had animated their colossal, violent physical forms. The Watchers were bound, but their spiritual poison had spawned a new, free-roaming generation of evil. This is the text's terrifying, specific explanation for the undeniable origin and insidious persistence of active evil in the world. A radical, challenging departure from simpler, more human-centric narratives focusing solely on Adam's fall or the temptations of a single, archetypal fallen angel like Satan. The Watchers, the primary rebels, were bound deep beneath the earth and imprisoned. The giants, their physical progeny, were slain and their bodies utterly destroyed. The great flood would soon cleanse the physical world of the accumulated bloodshed and corruption. But these newly generated demonic spirits, born directly from the violent death throes of the giants, remained incorporeal, invisible, perhaps even impervious to the physical waters of the flood. They became the unseen, predatory, corrupting forces plaguing humanity throughout all subsequent history, constantly tempting mortals towards idolatry, sexual immorality, violence, greed, and betrayal, causing inexplicable sickness, sudden madness, devastating misfortune, and fatal accidents, whispering insidious, corrupting thoughts, doubts, and blasphemies directly into human minds, inciting bitter strife, social oppression, political tyranny, and unending warfare among nations. The overt physical monsters were gone, eliminated in a single violent generation, but a virulent, invisible, spiritual contagion. An enduring, pervasive shadow of evil now perpetually haunted the seemingly cleansed world, operating unseen from the shadows, relentlessly continuing the destructive legacy of the Watchers' original sin through subtle manipulation, constant temptation, direct affliction, and the exploitation of human weakness. Enoch, his terrifying task as divine messenger to the fallen and privileged witness to heavenly judgment now complete, was then, according to the later sections of the book, taken on further, even more extensive visionary journeys, elevated from the status of reluctant witness to that of honored, initiated cosmic voyager. Guided by illuminating angels like Uriel, the revealer of celestial secrets, he was shown in intricate detail the hidden architecture, the very blueprints of the cosmos, the vast celestial storehouses containing the winds, hail, frost, and snow, the deep, secret foundations of the earth itself, the precise celestial portals through which the stars, sun, and moon proceed on their complex, ordained courses according to divine law. He witnessed firsthand, with harrowing clarity, the terrifying, desolate places of eternal punishment being prepared for various classes of cosmic sinners, fiery chasms burning endlessly, lightless abysses of utter ice and profound darkness where the fallen stars, a clear symbol for the imprisoned Watchers, would face their ultimate, agonizing public torment after their long imprisonment underground expired at the end of days. He saw the grim, functional, inescapable prisons where divine cosmic order was enforced with terrifying absolute finality, but offering a necessary counterpoint and a measure of hope for humanity. He was also granted breathtaking visions of the contrasting realms of pure light, eternal peace, and unimaginable sensory beauty, the blessed, perfumed, idyllic abodes prepared specifically for the souls of the righteous humans who endured the trials of the haunted, demon-infested world below. This offered a tantalizing, motivating glimpse of the eventual, glorious reward awaiting those who maintained faith and righteousness despite the pervasive darkness. These elaborate, detailed visions served collectively as a stark, unambiguous confirmation of the book's core worldview. Justice in this complex universe, as conceived by Enoch, was meticulous, inescapable, terrifyingly absolute. Actions, both angelic and human, carried profound, inescapable, eternal consequences, and the vast cosmos held intricate laws, astonishing beauty, and terrifying secrets far beyond normal human comprehension or everyday imagination. The divine order was thus shown to be violently, decisively reasserted after the rebellion, but the earth itself, despite the impending physical cleansing of the flood, was left fundamentally scarred, spiritually compromised, and irrevocably haunted by the invisible, predatory, demonic offspring of its celestial violation. Part 6. A Haunting Order. And so, the flood came. Exactly as the archangel Uriel had warned the patriarch Noah. The waters rose inexorably, waters unleashed from the storehouses of heaven above, waters bursting forth from the fountains of the great deep below, converging into a churning, gray, suffocating, obliterating curtain falling upon the entire world, cleansing the blood-soaked earth of the horrific physical legacy of the giants and the widespread, endemic human corruption they both represented and actively fostered. Noah, his immediate family, and the carefully gathered pairs of animals survived, sealed within the miraculous sanctuary of the ark, floating precariously but safely above the drowned, silent world. Eventually, after the waters receded, they stepped out onto damp, strangely scoured, silent ground, seemingly offered a truly fresh start, a blank slate for humanity, consecrated under the vibrant, hopeful promise of a rainbow covenant stretching across the washed sky. A new covenant enacted, a new, fragile beginning offered to humanity. But was the world truly clean? Was the reset genuinely absolute? Had the root of evil been permanently excised? The Book of the Watchers, read closely with its disturbing etiology of demons, offers a profoundly unsettling, persistent, nagging answer. No. While the gross physical manifestations of the Watchers' terrible sin, their hybrid, monstrous, giant offspring, were indeed physically wiped away by the overwhelming deluge, the primary spiritual consequence, the demonic residue born from their violent deaths, remained untouched, perhaps even dispersed, by the waters. The evil spirits originating from the slain giants, being incorporeal, inherently spiritual entities, logically endured the flood, remaining invisible, eternally malevolent, perhaps clinging like a psychic contagion to the very air, the soil, the water, patiently waiting to plague the new, emerging post-diluvian world. The new world order, therefore, the world inherited by Noah's descendants, was established from its very inception on fundamentally, intrinsically haunted ground. The terrifying physical monsters were gone, yes, but they were immediately replaced by an unseen, insidious, pervasive spiritual threat. A threat perhaps even more dangerous and certainly more difficult to combat precisely because it operated invisibly from the shadows, working subtly within the hearts, minds, cultures, and societies of humanity, constantly whispering the same old, destructive, antediluvian temptations into newly vulnerable post-flood ears. This profound sense of cosmic unease, the chilling realization that the ultimate physical cleansing of the flood was somehow tragically incomplete on a deeper, more fundamental spiritual level, that the very roots of active demonic evil were left uncut and thriving beneath the seemingly cleansed surface of the renewed earth, hangs heavy and dark over the narrative's apparently hopeful resolution. The haunting wasn't washed away, it merely changed its form. The subsequent historical fate of the Book of Enoch itself seems to eerily, uncannily mirror the dangerous, hidden, contested, and marginalized nature of the volatile truths it claims to hold. Copies, as we noted, were preserved carefully for centuries, meticulously hand-copied and intensely studied by certain fringe communities like the Essenes at Qumran. These were separatist Jewish groups deeply preoccupied with ritual purity, cosmic dualism, the imminent apocalyptic warfare between the sons of light and the sons of darkness, detailed angelology, and the acquisition of hidden divine knowledge, gnosis, deemed necessary to navigate the treacherous, demon-infested end times. Its radical, detailed ideas clearly resonated powerfully within these circles, profoundly influencing strands of early Jewish apocalyptic literature and thought, and even undeniably finding significant echoes within nascent Christian communities. The New Testament's short, fiery Epistle of Jude, for instance, not only clearly references the Enochian narrative framework concerning fallen angels and their judgment, but remarkably directly quotes 1 Enoch chapter 1, verse 9, regarding the Lord coming with 10,000s of his holy ones to execute judgment upon the ungodly, a truly stunning citation of an external, non-canonical text within what would become inspired scripture, referencing specifically the judgment foretold against the fallen angels bound in darkness, a clear validation of this tradition's authority for Jude's audience. Other crucial New Testament concepts, including specific descriptions of the underworld abyss, Tartarus, mentioned in 2 Peter, another text influenced by Enochian ideas, the pervasive nature and explicit origin of demons as distinct from fallen angels, and certain dramatic aspects of angelology and final judgment scenarios likely owe a significant, if often subsequently obscured or unacknowledged, debt to the popular Enochian traditions widely circulating in Judea during the Second Temple period. Yet, despite this clear, demonstrable early influence and widespread circulation, the Book of Enoch, in its various complex parts, was ultimately decisively excluded from the final canonical scriptures of both mainstream rabbinic Judaism, as it consolidated after the destruction of the Second Temple, and the dominant forms of Orthodox Christianity, as its own canon was debated and formalized over subsequent centuries. Why this near-universal rejection by the emerging religious establishments? The reasons were likely complex and debated. Perhaps its highly detailed, speculative, sometimes bizarre angelology and demonology, including named angels and specific demonic functions, felt excessive or contradicted simpler models. Perhaps its specific blaming of named celestial beings for the primary origin of evil was seen as dangerously shifting blame partially away from human free will, and complicating the simpler, foundational Genesis narrative of the fall. Perhaps its graphic, explicit account of monstrous angelic human hybrids felt too mythological, too pagan, too strange. Perhaps its unique, elaborate cosmology, including detailed heavenly geography, complex astronomical speculations about a 364-day solar calendar, and multi-staged heavenly ascents, proved too challenging, too strange, too disruptive to the more streamlined doctrines, simpler cosmologies, and established historical narratives being carefully codified by the religious authorities. It offered powerful, comprehensive answers to difficult questions, certainly, but they were often uncomfortable, complex, potentially heterodox answers that significantly complicated the simpler theological frameworks being actively constructed and defended. Its suppression, or at least Its deliberate marginalization and discrediting can arguably be seen, therefore, as a conscious act by powerful religious authorities, a concerted attempt to sideline, bury, or defang a potent narrative deemed too volatile, too speculative, potentially too theologically dangerous to the stability and authority of the established, consolidating faith traditions. But, remarkably, against all odds, it wasn't entirely erased or forgotten. In one unique, geographically isolated corner of the ancient Christian world, within the venerable, deeply traditional Ethiopian Orthodox Tewahedo Church, insulated for centuries from many of the theological debates of Rome and Byzantium by geography and distinct liturgical and theological traditions, the complete Book of Enoch, incorporating the Book of the Watchers alongside its other diverse sections, was not only meticulously preserved through diligent copying, but consistently, unreservedly held as fully sacred scripture, an integral part of their larger official biblical canon from antiquity right through to the present day, read in their liturgies, informing their theology. A truly unique instance of textual survival and unbroken canonical acceptance, a mysterious, enduring preservation of this ancient, challenging, unsettling tradition, strongly suggesting its powerful, detailed message held particular resonance, significance, and perceived truth for this specific, ancient, enduring Christian community. This complex, fascinating history of being hidden away for millennia in remote desert caves, clearly influencing canonical biblical texts, yet ultimately being rejected and suppressed by the religious mainstream of both Judaism and Christianity, only to survive fully intact and fully venerated in a unique ancient African church, feels like a powerful testament to the perceived potency, controversy, and enduring relevance of its contents. The dramatic story of the book becomes almost as haunting, significant, and suggestive as the terrifying story told within it, hinting at a volatile, dangerous knowledge that stubbornly refuses to stay completely buried, a challenging truth deemed too dangerous or inconvenient for most, yet fiercely guarded, cherished, and transmitted across millennia by a faithful, persistent few. The physical world was rebuilt, repopulated after the flood, but the spiritual haunting described within the text, and the forbidden text describing its origins, lingered persistently, disturbingly, in the margins of accepted reality. Part 7. Echoes in the Dark. So what are we truly left with, after finally, carefully unrolling this ancient, potent, forbidden scroll in the dim light of our modern age? We are left with a chilling, profoundly disturbing, radically alternative history of our world and its deepest problems. A tale not merely of simple human failing or predictable temptation, but of high-level, premeditated celestial crime, of powerful angels consumed by lust, who fell willingly, knowingly from unimaginable grace, of terrifying hybrid monsters who literally, physically walked and ravaged the earth, and of a divine judgment so severe, so absolute, it violently reshaped reality itself, but, crucially, tragically, left behind a persistent, invisible, spiritual malignancy. We are left, most disturbingly, with a specific, material, terrifying explanation for the pervasive origin and relentless persistence of active evil in the world, presented not merely as an abstract philosophical concept, a privation of good, or solely a human psychological problem, but as the actual lingering, disembodied, sentient, malevolent spirits of the ancient giants, themselves the monstrous offspring of forbidden angelic human union, cursed by God to forever plague humanity, psychically and physically, from the invisible shadows that surround us. What does it truly mean? What are the existential implications if we dare to seriously contemplate such a story today, not as mere fiction, but as a possible, albeit terrifying, account of reality's hidden layers. What if evil possesses concrete, traceable roots, not just on earth, not just within the flawed human heart, but originates higher up, in the heavens themselves, in a catastrophic cosmic betrayal by beings meant to be protectors? What if our world, seemingly solid, predictable, scientifically mapped, and known, is in fact invisibly infested, perpetually haunted, subtly influenced and manipulated by the spectral, predatory residue of primordial monsters, the demonic ghosts of slain giants still carrying out their father's rebellious agenda? The Book of the Watchers, if engaged with seriously, forces us relentlessly to confront these deeply disturbing, paradigm-shattering questions, challenging our comfortable, modern, often secular assumptions about a purely material universe, guaranteed divine benevolence, the limits of reality, and exclusive human responsibility for the darkness that pervades our world. Its potent, enduring archetypal themes, powerful fallen angels obsessed with forbidden beauty, monstrous hybrids born of unnatural desire, the catastrophic gift of dangerously seductive forbidden knowledge, apocalyptic cosmic warfare between primal forces of light and darkness, devastatingly absolute divine wrath, the specific birth of terrestrial demons from the spirits of slain giants. These themes clearly resonate profoundly, deeply within the collective human psyche across cultures and millennia, tapping into ancient, primal, perhaps even inherent anxieties. Why else would this detailed, elaborate, often grotesque narrative, officially suppressed and marginalized by dominant religious authorities for so many centuries, refuse to completely die, continuing to surface and dramatically resurface in the undercurrents of religion, folklore, mythology, art, literature, and esoteric thought throughout history? It speaks directly, powerfully, to our deepest, most persistent fears about the unknown, about the terrifying possibility of unseen, powerful forces actively manipulating our world and our lives, about the inherent fragility of order, reason, and civilization itself, and about the terrifying, inescapable, eternal consequences of cosmic transgression, both human and divine. It offers a tangible, specific, albeit horrifyingly supernatural source for the seemingly inexplicable suffering, the endemic violence, the frustrating chaos we witness constantly in the world, suggesting perhaps that humanity remains tragically caught in the collateral damage, the perpetual crossfire of an ancient, ongoing cosmic war we barely comprehend, let alone know how to fight. And the echoes persist, undeniable, strange, often surfacing in unexpected places. You can hear them clearly amplified in the complex, hierarchical angelologies and systematic demonologies developed within later Jewish Kabbalah and various streams of medieval and Renaissance Christian mysticism, meticulously exploring the intricate hierarchies of heaven and the terrifying depths of hell, often drawing implicitly and sometimes explicitly on concepts and names derived from the broader Enochian corpus. You hear distinct thematic echoes in various Gnostic texts emerging from the early Christian centuries, wrestling intensely with the perplexing nature of the divine, often positing a flawed, ignorant, or even malevolent creator, God, the demiurge, responsible for the fallen, corrupt state of the material world, sometimes explicitly associating this primordial fall and entrapment with the actions of rebellious, ignorant, angelic beings, mirroring Enoch's watchers. You see the potent fascination embodied dramatically in the strange, intense, ultimately tragic efforts of brilliant figures like the Elizabethan mathematician, astronomer, and occult philosopher John D. alongside his controversial and perhaps unstable scryer Edward Kelly, dedicated years of perilous effort to seeking direct, unmediated communication with angelic beings through a complex, ritualistic system involving scrying stones and specific invocations, a system he himself explicitly called Enochian, believing with fervent conviction that he was tapping into the primordial, powerful, pre-Adamic angelic language and accessing the secret cosmic knowledge that the biblical patriarch Enoch himself possessed. It was a profoundly dangerous quest for forbidden, powerful knowledge that chillingly, ironically, mirrors the Watcher's own original catastrophic sin of revealing heavenly secrets prematurely to humanity. Even today, in our supposedly enlightened, secular, rational 21st century, the whispers, the echoes, continue transformed by modern culture and technology, but often eerily recognizable in the fabric of contemporary anxieties, conspiracy theories, and alternative spiritual beliefs. In the enduringly popular theories of ancient astronauts seeding humanity or ancient aliens technologically interfering with our primitive development, narratives that simply replace angels and demons with technologically advanced extraterrestrials but retain the core narrative structure of powerful non-human intervention, genetic manipulation, and the double-edged gift-curse of advanced knowledge. In persistent, often wildly imaginative, internet-fueled fringe conspiracies about secret Nephilim bloodlines somehow surviving the Great Flood and secretly manipulating world governments, financial systems, and cultural trends from the deepest shadows hidden amongst us, continuing their ancestors' agenda. In the dramatic narratives emerging from contemporary paranormal investigations and the resurgence of formal religious exorcisms, practitioners often seek contact with or perform expulsion of unseen, hostile entities, sometimes classifying these spirits and their behaviors in ways that strongly resonate with Enoch's specific description of the restless, malicious, earthbound, tormenting demons born directly from the spirits of the slain giants. These diverse modern myths, popular beliefs, and deep-seated fears, whether interpreted literally as hidden truth, understood metaphorically as expressions of cultural anxiety, or dismissed entirely as fanciful delusion, collectively demonstrate the enduring, magnetic, archetypal power of the core Enochian narrative to tap into our deepest collective anxieties about hidden histories, powerful non-human intelligences, the mysterious origins of evil, and the unsettling, persistent, nagging possibility that consensual reality is far stranger, vastly more complex, potentially far more dangerous, and significantly more populated by unseen forces than our conventional modern understanding allows us comfortably to imagine. The Book of the Watchers and the larger Book of Enoch it introduces remains therefore a profound, challenging enigma, a forbidden scroll rescued miraculously from millennia of darkness, a suppressed history that radically challenges religious orthodoxies and historical narratives, a disturbing source of terrifying revelation that simply refuses to be silenced or fully explained away. It stands today, now widely available, as a stark, deeply uncomfortable reminder that sometimes the oldest, strangest, most rejected stories hold the deepest, most unsettling secrets about ourselves and our cosmos, and that the long shadows cast by the ancient primordial past might stretch much further, reach much deeper, and prove much darker and more influential than we typically dare to admit. What other astonishing truths remain buried deep in the dust of millennia, waiting for rediscovery? What other forbidden scrolls, containing equally challenging revelations, lie waiting patiently in undiscovered desert caves or forgotten monastic archives? What other potent echoes of ancient cosmic conflict and primordial non-human terrors still linger, vibrating perhaps just beyond the fragile edges of our normal perception, waiting patiently, silently, perpetually in the dark. As we step back from the crossroads, remember, the veil between the known and unknown is thinner than we think. But the story doesn't end here. This is just the beginning. Because what we explore here is not just about the phenomena, but the journey that we are all on, searching for meaning and our purpose in life, seeking the knowledge and wisdom to solve the deeper mysteries in our universe and to find and fulfill our destiny. Unexplained sightings, spirits, and science, they are all connected, and they have been interwoven into the grand tapestry of life. So remember, keep pulling at the threads, because this has been Crossroads of the Veil.